So in this video we're going to go through Charles Leclerc colliding with Oscar Piastri and the ridiculous steward's decision. But before we do that, I'm going to show you something relating to the Lewis Hamilton George Russell situation on lap 1, which we've failed to actually look at yet. So this is the cars coming down to turn 5 on lap 1. If we look at what's going on, Antonelli is there. Leclerc is overtaking Max Verstappen. Clearly Verstappen's car's running out of energy. And then you've got Lewis has overtaken George. And then you've got Oscar behind Lewis. So let's just play this. And back here, you've got the two Red Bull B team cars having a fight. Now, one of the dynamics that we have not actually focused on too much, but one thing to consider, these Red Bull B team cars consistently are pushing each other off the road, and consistently the stewards are saying no further action necessary. Now, that serves two purposes. It doesn't penalise the Red Bull B team. Note that the decision's going in favour of Red Bull. Max not getting penalties, decision goes in favour of Red Bull. Red Bull B team not getting penalties, decision going in favour of Red Bull. Red Bull, I mean, up until the introduction of the Cadillac team, Red Bull, with 4 out of 20 competitors, meant that they own 20% of the grid. That is a significant proportion. Okay, so they've got a big influence, an influence of control over what is actually going on. But what happens then is, if you don't penalise a driver, they've still infringed. They've pushed another car off the track. They've committed a foul. By the steward's just going, oh yeah, but it's on his teammate, so don't worry about that. No, because when you get a penalty, that penalty isn't just how it affects you and the person that you've infringed against. It impacts you relative to everybody else in that race. So when Lewis Hamilton was given a 5-second penalty for this bullshit penalty for the collision with George Russell, it didn't affect Lewis's race relative to George Russell. No, what it affected was his race overall, and numerous other competitors got the benefit of that. And that should be exactly the same for these racing bull drivers. Okay, if you perform an illegal maneuver, if you crowd somebody off the track, then you get the penalty for that crime. And therefore, if that drops you 5-10 seconds, it should be 10, then there might be other competitors that leapfrog you. But we'll have a look at that bit in a minute. Let's just come down here. So actually, if we look at the rear wings of these cars, let's focus on the rear wings, because brakes. The deflection in the rear wing is a clear indication of brakes. Now what we're getting in this era of cars is, because the energy is kind of running out of energy, they're changing down, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're on the brakes. They're clearly decelerating, and they're probably using like engine braking, the kind of kinetic energy recovery system. I don't know if that still exists. I'm kind of guessing on this, but they're not necessarily using their brakes to slow them down. Their cars may be slowing down because the energy levels of the electricity part of the power unit is running out, so that might be slowing them naturally. But I believe when you hit the brakes, that active aero shuts, and we've just seen that. So at this point in time, we can see who's hitting the brakes, if this is what I'm saying. So just, again, keep your eye on the rear wings of these cars. There's Max's gone. There's Oscar's gone, because he's got a car in front of him. He's got to go. He's got to stop, because he can't do much about it. So it's only actually here From this view, it's better. George is still not quite alongside Lewis, and we are there. He is just about there, isn't he? It's about level with Lewis there, and Oscar's had to hold station there. Now, why has Oscar not sent it up the inside? Because Oscar knows he'd be carrying too much speed. The gap's there. Why hasn't he done it? Well, he's done so because he knows that it's too late. He didn't get himself halfway alongside by the braking zone. Funny that Oscar knows that, isn't it? It's funny that a Formula One driver knows that he is not eligible now to send it up the inside. The gap's there, isn't it? But he knows the rules of engagement of the sport. And coming around here, look at the lines of the cars. So you've got Kimi Antonelli. His tyres are over the white line. Look at Charles Leclerc, the second car. He is maybe 30 centimetres this side of the white line. Two F1 cars driving the same part of the track, driving it in a different way. Who is at fault there? Who caused the collision there? Oh, nobody. Are they allowed to take that sort of line? Of course they are. Max Verstappen probably clips a white line. Lewis Hamilton following a very similar line to Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri now following a very similar line. We'll go back and have a look at these racing balls in a minute. Look at the line Charles Leclerc's on. Is that okay? Nobody's got a problem with that. Max is tighter. Which one's right? Which one's wrong? Neither's wrong. Now, if there's a car outside of Charles, is Charles doing anything wrong? No, he's not. And we get an impact about here. And that impact, Lewis takes a correction, and this is what happens to George as a result of the impact. George has got too close, he's caused a collision, and it's caused this situation. Now, what is wrong with what Lewis Hamilton is doing there? Has Lewis come in here too fast, locked up, come straight across here? No. Has Lewis come across here and driven George Russell out of track room? No, he hasn't. Is Lewis Hamilton the one that is pinned in with a car on his outside that is not maintaining sufficient gap? Now, it's George that's trying to do the overtake. He's responsible for maintaining a significant gap. On going around this part of the corner, it's the car on the outside who is responsible for maintaining the gap. On exit, well, we're going into a chicane, so on exit, Lewis becomes a car on the outside. Relatively speaking to the corner, Lewis becomes the one who is responsible. Even on tracks where we don't immediately follow it with a left-hand turn like this one, on exit, the responsibility would transfer to Lewis Hamilton, so that when we got to where they're heading now, when we come round a curve, naturally the racing line would be to start wide where this curving is here, start out there, come across to the inside, and then carry the speed across, which brings you out wide on exit. So as you're coming across here, the responsibility, having come around here, then switches to Lewis Hamilton to ensure that by here, he does not run the other car out of track room. That is if the other driver has been eligible for that by making himself eligible by being in the right position at the braking zone. It's not until this point in here that we know, that we can actually assess. We can only assess whether or not he's done that when these two cars arrive here and there is space for the car on the outside. Up until that point, this car that's on the outside is the one that has to maintain the gap. And he has to maintain the gap, okay, maintain the distance between the two cars until he gets to this side of the track. Once he's reached this side of the track, well, he's gone as far as he needs to go. He's maintained the gap as much as he needs to, and it's now becomes the car on the inside who's responsible for maintaining that gap, because this car is at the track limit. And therefore it's the other car who has the remaining track space, who becomes responsible. Lewis doesn't have any more track space than this. He is essentially pinned up against the inside. And even if he's 30 centimetres away from the inside of the track, it doesn't matter. His momentum is actually bringing him this way across the track anyway. This car on the outside is the one with all of the room. This car is the one that is responsible for leaving the room. Now, just watch these cars come through here again. Okay, so they've all come from there and they've all done that. And they've all been relatively close to the edge of the track there. Charles Leclerc being the one that's jutted out a little bit. But nobody was complaining about that line and that being causing a collision. Why didn't it cause a collision? Well, there was nobody on his outside and there was nobody therefore restricting his movement. Now let's look at the racing bull. So let's turn our attention to these two cars here. And let's go back a bit further. So one is trying to challenge the other. Let's have a look here. So we've got all these 200-metre boards. One's trying to come out. Make an attacking move around the outside. Looks like that one's put the brakes on, the one on the outside. Followed by the one on the inside. But where has it actually got itself alongside? Well, it's about there. It's ahead now, just slightly. So approximately 70 to 75 metres out from the corner, which is pretty late. Again, this dynamic is more difficult to judge under these new design of cars due to when cars are slowing down due to running out of power as opposed to actually braking. So it is more difficult to actually make accurate judgment of when they're actually braking and when it is they're just running out of power. But we've still got to apply the same parameters. So has he earned himself track room going around this corner? Because yes, yeah, he is entitled to track room on exit of this corner based on his location here. He's put himself in a position, he's trying to make an overtake around the outside. He's got himself at least level with the car he's trying to overtake in the braking zone. So entitled to track room. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean he's got to hit that apex? He's got to hit that apex, otherwise there'll be a collision. Yeah? As long as he hits the apex, he's all right. If he hits this curve, he's all right. Let's have a look. Oh, shit. The car on the inside is what, a car's width away from the inside of the track. Did he cause a collision? No, he didn't cause a collision. Why not? Oh, it's because the car outside of him maintained a gap. Stayed outside of him, didn't it? Can you see that? The car on the outside judged his position relative to the car on the inside and ensured that there was no collision. Did he have a right? Did he have a right to come across here? No, he didn't. Nobody has a right to a particular part of the track. They only have a right to racing room on the track. Racing room still means maintaining your distance away from your competitor. That's what racing room is. So just because he's got himself alongside, and he got himself alongside back there, which made him eligible to be left room on exit of the corner. When we get round to the exit of this corner, he needs to be left track room. That doesn't give him right to where the Ferrari approximately is now. Slightly wider, because you need a full car's width on the inside, in between the white line and where the Ferrari is. It doesn't give this racing bull on the outside the right to approximately this location where the Ferrari is. No, that racing bull is racing another car. That other car is allowed to be on that track, providing he doesn't crowd the other car off the track. Is it a reasonable line? Are they doing anything wrong? No, they're not. How far away from the edge of the track are they going around the corner? You do not have to hit the curbing, the apex. You don't have to be pressed up against that side of the track. And two cars can still make it around there. Now your problem is on exit of the corner, because they're carrying so much speed around that shape of a curve as opposed to flattening the curve out by being closer to that edge of the track, you don't make that curve very well. And it causes what we're going to see now, which is the car on the outside is off the track. Now, I can't see the onboard to know whether he's fully off the track or whether his tyres on the right hand side of his car are still touching the track or the white line. But he's actually not got a full car's width on the track, has he? So here, he's been ran out of track room. He is eligible for a full car width on exit of this corner, and the red Racing Bull on the inside has not left him that. So this is where the onus switches. Up until here, the car on the inside is not doing anything wrong. Car on the inside not doing anything wrong. You could say it's aggressive by being defensive, keeping the other car wide, but that's racing. Okay, he's still making the corner. Not a problem, not a problem, not a problem. But it becomes a problem here as the track room for the car on the outside then actually disappears. Now, I will give it this mitigating circumstance. The mitigating circumstance here, if they can see it, is ahead of them they are seeing a spinning car. So therefore, you don't drive at it. You would try to swerve out of the way of it. And it might well be, I don't know for sure, it might well be that they've tried to, or certainly the Racing Bull on the inside has tried to move his way to the outside of the track to make sure that he doesn't drive straight into Russell's car. I'm going to give him the benefit of that doubt. But this is the way you start need to looking at these situations. You see, this car going off the track here, I would say exactly the same. This Alpine, that's a problem because he cuts over here and he slots back in ahead of this car. Now, again, look at this perspective. This is the Alpine, this is the Audi. What happens? The Alpine leaves the track, but is he leaving the track because he's starting to see, is he able to see George Russell spinning, and is he thinking, fucking hell, get out of there. Don't need to be involved in a multi-car pileup. I will give him that benefit, okay? But if it wasn't for George Russell doing that, what this Alpine doing here, are just driving across there, and don't get me wrong, I think if he has seen what Russell is doing, him doing this is intelligent driving. I think that's Gasly. It could be Colapinto. I think that's Gasly. If he's doing it in response to seeing Russell do that, get yourself out of trouble. That's good driving if that's what he's done. If he's just realised he's overcooked it and it's like, oh, I'll just cut the corner, it's not acceptable. But what he's then done, he has waited for the two Racing Bulls to get back ahead of him, and then he slotted himself back in the position he was. Now, like I say, mitigating circumstance here, the way that I would judge this is give him the benefit of the doubt in that at this point in time, he may well have seen George Russell doing that, and rather than attempt to remain on the track, because there he looks like he's on course to remain within track limits. But then we've got George Russell looking like he's going to be T-boned. So it looks like he then makes a decision to go, well, see, it's an active decision at that point in there, that time there, where he actually looked capable of staying on the track. So I would just treat that as to say, well done. Well done. You did the right thing to seek to prevent what could have been a worse incident, and slotting back in that location is absolutely fine. Were it a different scenario where he just had somehow lost control, left the track, gone over here, and then just slotted in that position, no, you can't just leave the track and not become disadvantaged. You've not driven your car under the required control and you've still maintained position. No, you should drop at least one position if you do that. But like I say, on this occasion, who was that? Whichever of them drivers was, whether it was Gasly, whether it was Colapinto, I'll congratulate them for their driving on that, if it was genuine that that's what they were doing. And I will give these racing bulls the benefit of the doubt that this one on the inside has moved himself further over as a reaction to what is unfolding with George Russell. Okay, so I'm not going to vilify them guys for what they did in this particular circumstance, but understand this part of the dynamic here. There is no problem with what these cars are doing at this point. Two cars can be racing each other around a track doing this. Not a problem. Not a problem. No collision, is there? Just because they're not where Lewis is pinned up against the track, George is next to him. These two aren't pinned up against the edge. The inside driver's not pinned up against the edge. That's not a problem. He's not causing a collision, is he? Why is there no collision? Well, it's because the one on the outside is maintaining a distance away from the one on the inside. It's not the one on the inside that's maintaining the gap, is it? Because you would classify him as the one maintaining the gap by jumping across inside. It's the one on the outside who is maintaining the gap, judging the position of his car relative to the one on the inside. George isn't doing that. George is the one responsible for judging his position relative to Lewis at that stage. Lewis is the one that's coming out of a corner. You naturally, when you clip that, you naturally come away from it. The momentum is going to make you do that. Lewis was entitled to do that. The speed that he took into the corner, he was entitled to take into the corner because he actually was entitled to the full width of the track on exit because George had not reached the appropriate position to afford him track room on exit. So Lewis took the appropriate speed into the corner, impacted by what Max Verstappen was doing, because obviously Lewis had to slow his car because he couldn't go any faster than what Max Verstappen was going to. So Lewis wasn't doing anything unreasonable. George wasn't driving appropriately there. These two cars, completely different location. So at this point in the track here, I'll keep my cursor there. When these two cars get to there, where are they? This is where George's car is. Oh, the camera moves. So I can't even maintain the cursor in exactly the same position. But we'll try and pick a point. So at that point there, okay, and I'll try in line with this red section there. That's the location of Lewis and George. Look at the difference. In line there. These two cars are much further over. No collision. So the car on the inside is much further over. No collision. Why? Because the car on the outside maintained the gap. And it then becomes the job of the car on the inside to maintain the gap when we get to this section here. When George, had he have been all the way over here at that point and Lewis hit him, then it would be Lewis's fault. But the collision's about there. And how much room has George got? George had the opportunity. Well, look at Charles. Look at Max on a different line. Is George trying to follow Max's line? Well, Lewis was following Max's line. You can't follow Max's line, George. The car on the outside needs to be this further away. Just like here, the car on the outside needs to be further this way. There's a collision. How far was George away from this side of the track? We get these two cars here. This is where this car is clipping the outside of the track. That should be then maintained all the way through. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, saying that the inside Racing Bull car was taking evasive action. Right, we'll now go and do the Oscar Piastri Charles Leclerc situation. Okay, we're on lap 8. Oscar is attempting to make an overtaking manoeuvre around the outside, which he's fully entitled to do. So we're going down here. He's gaining, and he has not earned the right to track room on exit of the corner. Okay, no problem. That's all it means. He tried to make an overtake. He tried to put himself in a position to make, to be afforded racing room around this corner. He didn't achieve that, so he then isn't entitled to be left room on exit of this corner, and therefore should yield, should back out, right? And all that means is by the time we get to the exit of the corner, Oscar's still not there and keeps on the track, which means he decelerates more going around the corner, so that the speed differential between the two cars means that Leclerc will naturally move his car a full car length ahead of Piastri and slot into that gap in front of Piastri. That's all it means. So just double check this again. He's trying, like he's eligible to do, and then we jump to there, okay? Because we go, according to this footage, trying, 150, jumped, and we're now at 75 metres out. So we've missed that section of the battle there. We can't tell whether he got fully alongside before this. Again, this is what Formula 1 does to us. 150, jump. So there's the 50, there's the 100, there's the 150. It cut off there and it picks it up here. And at this point here, he is behind. Whether between there and there he got himself fully level and Charles stayed in, we can't say from what they're now showing us. Anyway, if we make this, we make the determination, and it might well be that Oscar's already on the brakes. Let's see if we see a wing movement in Oscar's car. I'll try and hit stop straight away. I'm hitting stop as I'm seeing that 150 board come level, and it takes us straight to this. So, you would think the car on the outside can carry more speed. I believe that rear wing is open on Oscar's car. Let me see if I can zoom in. Sorry, shut on Oscar's car. Looks like the rear wing is shut on Oscar's car. Now, Oscar is entitled to a full car's width on track. And here, Charles has moved over. Oscar can go no further. He doesn't have to exceed that white line. And Charles has hit him. He's entitled to a car's width on his outside, and Charles has hit him. Charles has driven into him. Charles Leclerc has caused that collision, and as a result of that collision, it damages Oscar's car. Damages the front wing. Impacts Oscar's race. Impacts the speed of Oscar's car. That is clearly an infringement by Charles Leclerc. Clearly an infringement. He has caused that collision. Oscar was fully entitled to be there. He was on the outside trying to make an attempt. Now, as it was, from what we could assess, all that situation meant was he had not earned the right to racing room by the time we got to here. Meaning that where Charles Leclerc is now, okay, the line that he has taken, he did not have to leave a car's width for Oscar Piastri, because Oscar Piastri had not earned the right to track room there. Meaning that Oscar Piastri, by this stage here, would have had to just back out and slot in behind. Okay, that's all it means. That is all it means. If Oscar would have been fully alongside, it would have meant by the time we get to here, Charles Leclerc would have had to leave a car's width on exit, so he'd have had to take a tighter line around the corner. leaving a car's width on his outside. He didn't have to do that. But he infringed here. Despite Oscar not earning the right to track room, it's not fair game to hit him. You have driven your car into the space where his car is, and you have hit him. That is causing a collision. That is a clear infringement. That is at least a 10-second penalty. At least a 10-second penalty. Because you've committed the infringement of causing a collision. It's entirely your fault. And not only that, you've impacted the chances of your fellow competitor. You have harmed their race chances. That's the fact of the situation. Now, if you look at the way the stewards have dealt with this, it's absolutely atrocious and demonstrates they do not know what they're doing. So the stewards have received a report and considered the following matter and determined the following. It should not be a report from the race director. The race director is there to oversee the event and ensure it's safe running. The stewards should be able to pick up and detect. They should be watching the event, and they should be then picking out the fouls and then making the appropriate decisions. That is their job. Charles Leclerc of Ferrari, 15-20 race, collision with car 81 in turn 5. Alleged breach. Alleged breach. It's not an allegation, it's a fact. It fucking happened. Decision, no further action. The stewards reviewed video and in-car video evidence. On the approach to turn 5, car 81 moved to overtake car 16 on the outside. Car 81 had some overlap on car 16. It's irrelevant. It is absolutely irrelevant, this notion of overlap. Two cars going down a straight at that point. One's driven into the other car. That's all that's happened. So, there we go, sorry. Car 81 had some overlap on car 16, but the front axle of car 81 was not ahead of the front axle of car 16, and there was no possibility of car 81 completing an overtake from that position. See, that's wrong. How you cannot categorically say whether there was a possibility of completing the overtake or not. It's not about whether your estimation there's a possibility of an overtake or not. The requirement is, the whole notion of the rules of engagement are you eligible for racing room based on your location in the braking zone? It's not about, do you think he'd have been able to perform the overtake or not? It's irrelevant. You might get somebody that's on the softest compound tyre whatsoever, and somebody on old hards, and so therefore somebody having superior grip levels that mean that they can pin it around the outside and come out in front. They could, but they might not be allowed to if they've not reached the appropriate position at the braking zone, because at that point the car on the inside will assess, oh, I've got full track room on exit, so I don't have to leave them room on exit, so I won't leave them any room on exit. That's how you assess it, not this notion of, oh, do we think he could have performed an overtake or not? Absolute bollocks. But this is the choose your own adventure book of the stewards. Make up your own story to somehow validate the decision that you make. There's no consistency in any of these stories that they tell. No consistency to the criteria that they're supposedly dreaming up to go by. It's a fucking choose your own adventure book every time. Just like legal. Okay? Car 81 had some overlap on car 16, but the front axle was not ahead of the front axle of car 16, and there was no possibility of car 81 completing an overtake. See, that's an opinion. Okay? That's not a fact. That's an opinion. In the steward's determination, car 16 did not deliberately crowd car 81 off the edge of the track. No, it didn't deliberately crowd it. It hit it, you fucking cunts. It fucking collided with it, you fucking cunts. Car 16 followed the racing line before... What are you talking about? It didn't follow the racing line. It had a car on its outside that was on the racing line. These fuckers ain't got a clue. Car 16 followed the racing line before the entry of turn 5 by moving slightly to the left to open up... What are you talking about? The racing line is closer to the outside of the track on the left-hand side. Oscar's car was there. So Charles isn't following the racing line. When you've got a car there, you can't move to the left. You have to leave at least a car's width. He didn't. He drove into that space that the other car was in, which only was a car's width. Car 16 followed the racing line before the entry to turn 5 by moving slightly to the left to open up the turn 5, and side-to-side contact occurred between the two cars. Yeah, and that's not allowed. See, this is the thing. What the strap-on fanboys, the drive to survive kiddies have become conditioned with the notion of is that contact between cars is acceptable. No. Motor racing, other than stock car racing, is a non-contact sport. So any form of contact is a foul. Now, some forms of contact will be overlooked. Some can be accepted that in this sport, being what it is, a dynamic sport, racers trying to compete at high speed, small margins for error, sometimes there will be errors. Sometimes there will be things where things don't go quite right. There will be the odd bit of contact. Now, if that bit of contact causes no harm, causes neither competitor any problems, doesn't result in one illegally gaining a position over the other, then often the drivers will just accept, you know what, we're in this, we're racing against each other, we're trying to do our best to avoid contact, and we got a bit close. We got closer than we should have done. There was contact. It didn't impact anybody. Impacts of that, collisions of that nature, can be looked upon and said, okay, we will deal with that as a racing incident. Okay, neither driver looked to be doing anything that was particularly wrong. There was no harm done, and we will deem that to be a racing incident. Here, harm has been done. Harm has been done to Oscar Piastri and his chances in that race due to the actions of Charles Leclerc, where he clearly committed an infringement of driving into the other car. It's his job to keep a distance away from it, and he drove into it. That's a clear infringement. He clearly caused that collision, clearly identifiable on the video. Look at what they've made up here to excuse it. About racing line, about no possibility of an overtake from that position. It's irrelevant. He was still entitled to be there, whether or not he was able to make an overtake or not. He was allowed to challenge. You're always allowed to challenge, but it comes a point where it's like, okay, you haven't met the criteria to be afforded track room on exit of this, so around this corner you need to back out, because by the time you get to the exit of this corner, then there's going to be no track room left for you. And that's what Oscar would have done, appeared to be doing. And Charles drove into him. Oscar wasn't moving across. Let's be clear about this. Oscar was not the one moving across that caused the impact. Oscar is not the one that is moving inwards. It's Charles Leclerc that's converged. It's Charles' car that's getting closer to this side of the track, squeezing Oscar and driving his car into the space that Oscar's car is in. That is what's caused the impact. Charles' car being closer to that edge of the track than a car's width. That is the problem, clearly. And the stewards... Side-to-side contact occurred between the two cars. In the circumstances, the stewards determined to take no further action. Why? You want to take no further action. Why? Somebody's committed a driving infringement. What's that caused? Well, that caused harm to Oscar Piastri's race pace. Oscar Piastri finished here, so that impacted his race time by having damage on his car now. You add 10 seconds to Charles Leclerc's time, well, that drops him a position, doesn't it? That drops Charles Leclerc down to third, and he committed that crime without penalty. Lewis Hamilton was given a penalty, so it added 5 seconds unjustly to Hamilton's race time. Hamilton sustained damage from what George Russell's car did to him. Hamilton's own team then fucked up by fucking Where's Wally deciding, we've got to wait, not touch the car for 5 seconds while the penalty's being served. Let's just chill out a bit. Let's not worry about adjusting the front wing and being ready to do that. Let's change the tyres. Oh, did anybody think to do the front wing? Oh, let's have a do it now. Oh, somebody told him to go. Didn't make the mistake with any wing adjustment on Charles's car, did you? But then Lewis stopped his car to check that he wasn't going to do any damage to the guy that he'd impacted. That cost him another few seconds. So it's highly likely Lewis's race was affected by at least 7 seconds due to the penalty, 5 seconds worth of penalty, probably another second or two stationary in the pits checking on his teammate who may have been injured. At least 7, and however many seconds, then the damaged front wing from the George Russell crash cost, and how many seconds it cost him driving a car where he's gone onto hards and they've not adjusted the front wing appropriately for the car to handle appropriately with those tyres on. That Lewis then still adapted his driving to still start lapping faster than others and still start gaining on others. But he was gaining on a damaged Oscar Piastri as well. All these things affect the outcome of the race. Charles Leclerc, we've got a second position for him there. He infringed. There should be at least 10 seconds. That would drop him below Max. Not that that pleases me, but that's the truth. Lewis, well, had he not suffered the things that he suffered, he would have likely been ahead of Max. How close would he have been to Kimi? Who knows? Who knows? But this is a shit show. This is an absolute shit show when you have decision makers who penalise Lewis Hamilton for what he did, where he was actually the victim of the situation of George's driving, with George being responsible for maintaining distance between the cars and not, and they penalise Lewis for that. And when Charles is responsible for leaving distance between the cars and he doesn't, no penalisation for Charles. Russell was at fault. Hamilton gets the penalty. Leclerc's at fault. Nobody gets the penalty. There's a problem. Now, we can't go putting this down to, oh, well, they've got the FIA have got a bias for Ferrari. That's why they didn't give Charles Leclerc a penalty, because the FIA don't penalise Ferrari. Well, they penalise Hamilton, so that one doesn't work. I'm running out of it. If it's not because Lewis Hamilton's skin colour, I'm running out of excuses. We've got plenty of people. The moment I mention racism, we got lots of people where it hurts their feelings. Okay, they don't like the notion of using that. Oh, we don't like that as an excuse. Can't just use the skin colour as an excuse. Well, hang on a minute. I'm going through all the reasons why it is that one guy, whenever anything like this happens, it's always the one guy where, when he's the victim of a situation, the other guy doesn't get penalised. Or they try and pin the blame on Hamilton. When he is guilty, well, they generally come down on him like a ton of bricks. When other drivers are guilty of similar, oh, nothing to see here. When Hamilton does it, yeah, you get the penalty for that. There is a clear pattern. There is a clear pattern of that taking place. Now, what are the reasons for that? Can't be the team that he drives for, because it happened when he was at Mercedes. It's now happened when he's at Ferrari. It happened when he's at McLaren. So it's not team favouritism or team hatred. His teammates don't suffer the same problem, do they? Other drivers from other teams don't suffer the same levels of, well, we could call it inconsistency, but it is consistent that it's always to him, and the others, it doesn't. So what's the reason for it? What's the difference between Lewis Hamilton and everybody else? So for those of you where it hurts your feelings when I mention the R word, racism, treating somebody with different coloured skin to how everybody else is treated, yeah? That hurts you, doesn't it? The very thought of that hurts you. You're like, oh, it's people using that as an excuse. No, it's because it's actually real. It's actually real. And if you're not big enough to actually admit that, if you haven't got the integrity to acknowledge that that is the truth, it is a real dynamic in this world, that there are a proportion of people, I don't know how big, but I would suggest it's significant. There are a proportion of people who treat others differently due to the colour of their skin. And those people that are on the receiving end of that are obviously going to feel a certain way about that. But then those people other people then don't like hearing that as an excuse. They don't like hearing the notion of, you're treating me different because of the colour of my skin. They don't like hearing that. And I'll admit, I, in the past, didn't like hearing it. And the reason I didn't like hearing it was because I also felt the victim of certain situations. So when people were saying, I'm the victim here, and I'm the victim because of the colour of my skin, I would think to myself, well, actually, I'm the victim of the same sort of thing here, and that's not due to the colour of my skin. That's not the reason why this sort of thing's happening. But that's when you need to look at the actual system and how it actually works. But here, you look at it. What else could it be? What else could it be? And let's stop worrying about yourself a bit, like I used to, thinking, well, I'm the victim of these kind of dynamics as well, so I don't think it's a race issue. Be big enough to realise, actually, often it is, because people do have their prejudice. People do have their perception, whether they admit it or not, they have their prejudice. And there are a significant proportion of people who treat others differently based on differences. And that is a dynamic. And actually, if you look at the owners of Formula One, Liberty Media, you look at their political affiliations, the type of politics that they support of the Republican Party in the US, and what do they stand for? Do they stand for integration, for a united group of people regardless of creed and colour? Or are they more of a supremacist bunch? The land of, for those of you who were born here, well, you might have been born here, but 250 years ago, you're descendants of people who invaded there and killed all the indigenous population. But now it's a whites only country, is it? Rightio. Anyway, that'll do on this one. Thank you all for your time.